This is Gemara Pesachim Daf Sadi Aleph. Tonight's shir should be a closer for Shleim of Chaim Moshe ben Esther Easily Demir ben Yakir Men ben Vega Chaim ben Sar Shlon Ziv ben Reiz Eidol Sar Bas Kenan Delit Pasim As Chaisa Yisiol ben Mindel Eliezer Pretzes Yushav Leah Shom Bas Naomi Yushav Yushav Chana Faldov ben Iteriva Shmuel ben Tehila Taniva Chan Reizel Mutchaya Bas Mina Librach Bas Tevia Musa Dina Idol Bas Shena Mindel Simcha Tovia Bas Avigal Pasha Zivi ben Fega Tvayer Michilas Yipur Nas Lehuva Besoy Shar Chali Yisrael. We pick it up towards the bottom of Sadi Amid Beis. We're about 7 lines into the medium-sized lines. First word in line is Vehazava Sheichtins. We're in the middle of discussing people who are potentially fit to bring a carbon, but maybe right now they're not. Yesterday, the whole Amid Beis, we had a discussion at what level you have to be fit. Is the fact you have to go to the mikvah? Is the fact you have to bring a carbon? Does that disallow you from bringing a carbon? And then the Mishnah concluded that a zava, the zava gedayla, we can shecht for her on the 8th day, not the 7th, but rather the 8th day. So that's where we pick up today, concluding this discussion before we get into a new Mishnah. So says the Gemara, Tana Tana Kamid Ravada Barava, Va'azava Sheichtan Alei B'Shvi Shala. They learned that a zava you can shecht on the 7th day. Amar Zava b'shvi shalom michazia. A zava on day 7, is she fit? Afilu man da'amar sheichlim v'zoygen al tamei sharetz, which harkens back to yesterday's discussion. The sheet of Rav that held you could yes shecht for someone who's a tamei sharetz. Hani mili tamei sharetz the chazi l'orta. That's because someone who's tamei sharetz goes to the mikvah, harav shemesh, and then that night they're fit. But in this case, the zava al until the next day, the Masi Kapara, until the Zava has to bring her karbanos, Loi Chazia, is not fit. So says the Gemara, how could you tell me day 7? Says the Gemara, you're right. Ema b'shmini. It meant day 8. On day 8, that's when, just like our Mishnah. So the Gemara asks on that, Pshita, that's obvious. So the Gemara explains, Ma'u the Tema, I would have thought, given the Mechusar Kapara, you would have thought, since you're lacking a carbon, Loi, Kamash Malan, Kidder of Shemaya, like we saw yesterday, Kamash Malan, Kidder of Shemaya. And again, just to remind ourselves, where was Rav Shemaya? Rav Shemaya was about 10 lines from the top over here. Rav Shemaya was of the opinion that he said, Chazaka in Bezin Shalkanim Oinim Misham Ha'Shech L'Maisav Shebeshayfrais. Rav Shemaya was of the opinion that once you separate the carbon, that's going to be enough, and that's going to be the same thing. And we're saying over here, Ravina Amar comes along Ravina and he says, Nida. We're talking about a Nida. Tanatam, that's when you have to wait till day 8, as we'll see in a moment. Tanakameh, they learned in front of him, Nida Sheikhla Bishvi. They said a Nida on day 7. And again, we'll at the end point out, let's not get confused between the din of Tuma V'Taira, of a Nida being permitted to her husband, and the din of Tuma V'Taira, Nida eating her carbon, which is what we're talking about right now, Shechta the carbon Pesach, which we'll get to in a moment. So anyway, says the Gemara, the first variable I line, a Nida on day 7 is not fit. And now we explained similar to what we just said a second ago. Even according to Man Dharma, it says for Tamei Sharetz you can yes do a shechita of a carbon pesach for what's the reason? The chazi l'orta. Because that night, when everyone's eating the carbon pesach, they're going to be able to eat it. But Nida the orta l'shviu. Nida the night of day 7, the tavla she goes to the mikvah. But ad shmini dav derav shemesh lechazia, she cannot eat her carbon until the next day. This was the point we were just mentioning. It's true with regard to being permitted to her husband after going to the mikvah. Again, let's say hefsek tires on day 1, just to put it into practical terms, although there's lots of chumras we have. Let's say someone does a hefsek on Sunday night, so Sunday night the following week they go to the mikvah, so they're permitted to their husband after the mikvah that night, Sunday night. However, they're not allowed to eat karbanos until the next day, because you need harav shemesh, you need the sun to set, and the sun didn't set because they went to the mikvah after nighttime. Again, normally we saw Tamei Sharetz goes to the mikvah by the day, then it's sunset, that night they keep the carbon. That's the top of the Gemara. But over here, when it comes to Nida, we don't have that, says the Gemara, and therefore the Nida cannot eat until the next day, day 8. Eleima b'shmini must be day 8. Pshita, it's very obvious. The Gemara now explains similarly, like we said a moment ago. Hashtam azava the b'chusik kapara sheichtin azava, which needs to bring a carbon. Yeah, we're allowed to shecht for the zava v'zarkin alei. And you do this Rika, Bishmini on day 8. Nida does not lack anything. Nida doesn't bring a carbon. It's Pashay to Shachlin of Zakrin Allah. Answers the Gemara, Nida Tzrichle, there is a Chiddush. Hakamash lan b'shmini in b'shvi loy. It's teaching you this din. It's teaching you only on day 8, not on day 7. Like we learned in a Raisa. Kol chiyuvei tefillah tfilasan by yoim. Everyone else would be able to eat day 7 at night because they go to the mikvah by day. And then day 7 at night you have Erev Shemesh. However, aside for Nida v'yaled tfilasan by Layla, they have to go to the mikvah at night, and that's why you need the extra day 8. The time you learned in a Raisa, Yachal take tevelos by yoim. You would think you're allowed to be table during the day. Talmud Leimer, if you haven't been nidasa, tehei benidasa, a woman doesn't need to call shiva. All 7 days, if she has to go to the mikveh at night. V'yoledis ishkis to nida, and yoledis is equated to anida, and that is the chiddush. The chiddush is this din itself that anida has to wait till day 8. That concludes these Gemaras, and therefore, when it's day 8, you could check the Karban Pesach for the Nida, assuming she went to the mikveh the night before, because tonight, on day 8, she'll have Erev Shemesh, the sun will set, and then tonight she'll be allowed to bring the Karban Pesach. Says the Mishnah, Ha'aynein, moving along to the next Mishnah, as we move along to Sadi Aleph, Amar Aleph, Ha'aynein, someone who's relative, was unfortunately nifter, but the burial did not happen yet. Of someone who's digging up the ruins, a building fell, and you're looking for a person. And similarly, they promise someone they're going to get out of jail, or someone who is sick, someone who is elderly. They can eat meat. You could check for any of these people. Right now, the Einein, the person looking in the ruins, so they're about to get released from jail, all these people were allowed to shech for them on the regular time for the Karban Pesach, and they'll be able to eat it tonight. Says the Mishnah, Al Kulam, but on all these people, we don't shech for only people who can eat it, because someone who's elderly. Only people who are getting out of jail. Why? Because maybe it's not going to happen. And then the Karban Pesach is going to end up being possible. So we don't do it for these people by themselves. Any of these people in the Mishnah, if they end up becoming possible, they will not bring a Pesach Sheni, because right now they're fit to eat at the time of the Shechita, the same concept we keep on seeing, if at the time of the slaughtering, they're able to eat the Karban, even if subsequently they become forbidden, invalidated from the Karban, they would not have to bring a Karban Pesach Sheni. Chutz aside for, someone who's searching in the ruins, because we assume that there's going to be Tumah, because once they find that there's a dead person there, they become Tummy all the way back from the first moment. A bit of a discussion here. The top thesis gets involved. Why is that true? Why are they coming back to the first moment? Why don't they have a chazaka that we assume that there's no dead person there? Okay, but again, that's the Mishnah. So all these people, we assume they're going to be able to eat tonight. We could check for them. We do not check for people only in this category. However, if it happens that we shach for them and then they don't get to eat it, they become basal, they would not have to bring a Pesach Sheni. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Ravuna, Rabbi Yechon Shanu. The din of the Mishnah only applies to Ella Bisasurim Da'akum, Magaisha court. That's when we have to be concerned. Avul Bisasurim the Israel. If it's a Jewish court, again, we're talking about shechting only for people in jail. Let's say there's 10 people, fortunately getting out of jail. When did the Mishnah say you cannot shech for all telling them? Only if it's a Gaisha jail, because we're afraid they're not going to end up getting out. And you can yashach for them. Why? Since they promised them to keep them out of jail, they're going to hold true to their word. As the pasuk says, because of Klal Yisrael says the emes, so if they promise to get them out of jail, they're going to be released. Even that is only if they're outside the wall of Beis Pagi. Inside Yerushalayim, they can yes be included in the Karban Pesach. Why? Even by themselves, because even if they don't get out of jail, we could always reach them. Beis Pagi was inside Yerushalayim. We could always give them the Karban in jail. So those are the two qualifications of the din of the Mishnah that said you're not allowed to shecht for these people by themselves. So we continue the second to last narrow line. Lefika Chamira, we said if it happens that they become basal, the halacha is you do not bring a Pesach Sheni. Amar Rabbi Rav Chana, Amar Rav Yechon Leishanu Allah Gal Agul. This is only talking about if it's a round pile of rubble. Again, the person looking through the pile of rubble, we said he would be the one case that would yes have to bring the Pesach Sheni because we assume there's going to be a mace there. Says the Gemara, it's only by a gala round pile, of a gala roch long pile. Why? Because we could assume if it's a long pile, there's more of an assumption that the person searching is tar. So at the time of the shechita, we assume they're tar, and only afterwards they stepped over the mace, and that's when they became tummy. But at the time of the shechita, they were able to bring a carbon Pesach Rishon, so they do not bring the Pesach Sheni. Tanami Hachi, we learn similarly. Rav Shimon Eish Rav Yechon and Breiko Aimer B'Vachgech B'Gal. Itim a potter, itim chayiv. Sometimes you're potter from Pesach Sheni, sometimes chayiv. Keitzad, this should sound familiar. Gal agul, if it's a elongated round pile. Because we assume it was there the whole time, because there's no way to avoid it. Gal aruch, but if it's a long pile, potter, you were tar at the time of the shchita, and therefore you would you would not have to bring the carbon Pesach Sheni, because we assume that you were Yaitse in the Pesach Rishon. We assume that while the Shechita was happening, you did not yet step over the mace, and therefore you would not be Tamei. Says the Mishnah, fourth wide line, Ein, Shechtan is a Pesach El Yachid. You cannot shech the carbon Pesach for one person. We'll see in the Gemara, Divi Rav Yehuda, Rav Yesi Ma'atzir says it's allowed. Va'afilu Chabura Shal Mea, even a Chabur of 100 people, Sheni Chol Nechel Kazayis, they cannot eat a Kazayis, eat Shechtan Lamb, you cannot shech for them. Ve'inoz Chabura Zlashiv Avodim Ktanim, and you cannot make Chabura for women, slaves, and minors. So 3 dinim in the Mishnah. Din number 1, you cannot check the carbon Pesach for a singular person. Rav Yossi, that allows. Din number 2 in the Mishnah was even 100 people, but if they can't eat exercise, you cannot check for them. And din number 3 was you cannot make a chabura that comprises only women, servant, and ketanim. Says the Gemara, Tanur Rabban. This should sound familiar. How do you know that you cannot shech the carbon Pesach for a singular person? It says in the Torah, that you cannot shech the carbon be'achad sha'arecha on one of your gates. And this Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, that's we learn out. You cannot shech for one person. Rabbi Yesi Aimer, who says you're allowed to shech for one person, he learns the pasuk yachid. You could yes v'yachol lechol lachloi yachid v'yachol lechloi. If there's one person he can eat a shech, then alive you could shech for him. Asara v'einay yichayil lachloi, then ein shechtan aleim. That is where Rabbi Yesi learns. Rabbi Yesi hay be'achad my avdilei. What does he do with the word be'achad, which Rabbi Yehuda learned to teach me that you're not allowed to shech for one person? Mibaylich Rav Shimon says Rabbi Yesi, we need it for Rav Shimon. The Tani Rav Shimon Aimer. How do we know if we shech the carbon Pesach on a singular bama? Bishas Isra bama, his bamas were the mizbeach. There was a time period in Concise so that you're allowed to make your private mizbeach, so your private altars, but then it became forbidden. So how do you know if you did it at the time that it was forbidden? In one of your gates, this is where Rabbi Yossi says it's teaching us not a din about carbon Pesach, it's teaching us a din about bama. I would think even at the time of heter bamais, if you shech your carbon Pesach there, it would be no good. That is when this halacha applies. Rav Yehuda, according to Rav Yehuda, hi minole. Where does Rav Yehuda know this din? From Darti Shmas Mina. Rav Yehuda learns both out from the same bachad sharecha. Rav Yossi mimayt lahachit kamer Rav Shimon. How do you know? That's where Rav Shimon is coming to teach us din about Bama. How do you know? That's what he's learning out from the pasuk. Maybe he learns like Rav Yehuda. Says the Gemara. Rav Yossi answers Hudasa Amar Hudasa. Amar Lacha. Rav Yossi answers don't think that. It says in the Torah each person according to that which he eats, and that's what we already learned. That halachas we don't have to learn out both of the same pasuk. Rami Lei. Rav Ukva bar Chanina mi Parishna l'Rava. They asked the question from Rava. Miyamar Rav Yehuda in shechtin is a Pesach al Yachid. Is it true that Rav Yehuda holds you can't shech the carbon Pesach for one person? For him, I'll ask you a stira. Isha barisha shechtin alaf. A woman you could shech for the carbon Pesach rishon b'fnei atzo by yourself. Ub'sheni aisen as satfeilu, but in the sheni, a carbon Pesach sheni, she's tafel, she's auxiliary to the larger group. La'achirim divi Rav Yehuda. So you see clearly Rav Yehuda says you can shech the carbon Pesach for one person. Amar Lei says Gemara loitema b'fnei atzma. It means a group of women on their own. That's what Rav Yehuda is coming to say, but he's not coming to permit a singular person. So he said back to Rav Yehuda, well, what happened to the end of the Mishnah? But tonight it's out of the Mishnah. That's illegal. You can't make a group of only women. My love, That's when you're not allowed. Again, a big, maybe chiddush. The Mishnah said you can't make a group of nashim avodim and ketanim. We thought that meant you can't make a group of women, you can't make a group of servants, you can't make a group of minors. Now the Gemara is explaining lie. Nashim avodim and ketanim all together in one group, you cannot do. Why not? Nashim avodim, why can't you put them together? Misham tiflus, because they're very lightheaded, they're going to come to Avera. Ketanim avodim, why not? Misham pritzusa, because they're going to come to do Avera. It's the pritzus between the, and Rashi points out that we're chayshid over here for Mishkav Zachar, even though they're all males, we're chayshid that the Avodim, the servants of the Ketanim, they're going to have issues, and that's the reason why you can make them together. But there's no question, Puritusa, there's no question that you would not, that with regard to making a group of only women, that would yes be allowed, and that's how we're answering up this stira. Says the Gemara, Sadi Aleph Amid Beis Gufa. Let's go into this brisa. Isha barisha in sheichtan alel. We just said that a woman for the carbon Pesach, the first one, not Pesach Sheni, you can yes shecht for her, but if they also by yourself. Ubisheni carbon Pesach Sheni oisin is at tefillah achirim de Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda learned Pesach Rishon, she can be by herself. Pesach Sheni, she has to be part of a larger group. Rav Yezi Aimer, no. Isha b'sheni sheichtan alel. For a carbon Pesach Sheni, you could yes shecht for her, but if they also by yourself. Vein zarech leimar b'rishon. So if Yezi says both Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni, she can be by herself. Opinion number 2. Opinion number 3 of Shimon Aimer, Isha b'rishon oisin is at tefillah achirim. Shimon says Pesach Rishon, the woman could be auxiliary to the larger group. B'sheni ain't sheichtan alel kol ikar, she cannot be involved at all. So three wonderful shitas. Again, let's just get the shita straight, because now the Gemara is going to go into b'may kamifli, what exactly is the machlekes. So again, Rav Yehuda said Pesach Rishon, a woman could do by herself. Pesach Sheni, part of a group. Rav Yaisi said a woman could always do by herself. And Rav Shimon said Pesach Rishon, a woman could do with a larger group. He's the most machmir. Rav Yaisi is the most makel. Rav Yehuda's in the middle. But Rav Shimon says with Pesach Sheni, a woman cannot get involved at all. So says the Gemara, 7 lines down, b'may kamifli, what is this? 3-way machlekes of Yehuda, Rav Yasi, and Rav Shimon. Rav Yehuda Savar, opinion number 1, b'michsas nefashos, according to the number of souls. We've had this Joshua before. Va'afilu nashim, women are included; they're allowed to be involved in the carbon. V'chi tema, maybe you'll tell me. So says Rav Yehuda, for learning from a pasuk, so maybe they could even bring Pesach Sheni. So why am I saying they could only be part of a larger group for the Pesach Sheni? Says the Gemara, Ksiv chatu yisa ha'ishahu, referring to a man. Ish in Isha loy, and that is how Rav Yehuda learned Joshua number 1. V'chi tema, so what's everyone bothered? It sounds like women can't do it at all. V'chi tema yachavilu tefillah nami b'sheni lai. She can't even be tefillah. She can't even be auxiliary. It sounds like there's a drasha. Only men in Pesach Sheni. So why did Rav Yehuda say a woman could be auxiliary? She could be part of a larger group in Pesach Sheni. B'sheni lo yahani, says the Gemara, kechol chukas haPesach l'tefillah ba'alma. The words kechol chukas haPesach teaches me that the Pesach Sheni is equated to Pesach Rishon. Kechol chukas for all the halachas, so women can yes get involved. So again, Rav Yehuda learns out b'michsas nefashos teaches me women can go by themselves in Pesach Rishon. By Pesach Sheni, we have a special drasha of chatu yisa ha'ishahu, only men, but women can be auxiliary. Why? That's Rav Yehuda shita number 1. Rav Yaisi shita number 2. Again, what did he hold? Women could always be by themselves. My time with the Rishon b'michsas nefashos. That's very simple. Vafilu isha. Uksiv Pesach Sheni, says Rav Yaisi, Yisrael. That soul should be cut off. Nefesh. What is nefesh? An ambiguous word. Vafilu nashim. Ve'Allah, says the Gemara, asking on Rav Yaisi, what about Rav Yehuda's pasuk? What does he do with Rav Yehuda's pasuk that seemingly says only man, where Rav Yehuda learned, teaches me that women cannot do a karma Pesach Sheni by themselves. Lemute katan mikaris. That excludes a katan. So great, that's Rav Yaisi shita. Now we know that Rav Yaisi learned from Mechsas Nefashos, a part of word, teaching me that women could be both Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni by themselves. For Rav Shimon, shita number 3, Ksiv bar Rishon, ish. Therefore, ish, barishain ish, the word ish, in, yes, isha loy. Rav Shimon says, even by the Pesach Rishon, a woman cannot be by herself because of the word ish in the pasuk. But if you're going to tell me that, so maybe even a woman should not even be allowed to be auxiliary on Pesach Rishon because we learn out of the word ish. Says Rav Shimon, so once Rav Shimon learns the Michlas Nefashis like Rav Yehuda, Shita number 1, so maybe according to Rav Shimon, even Pesach Sheni should be allowed to be auxiliary. Says the Gemara, we have an exclusion by Pesach Sheni. Dechsev chatu yisa ha-ish, ish in, isha loy. Mimai, how do we know? Come mayit lay. Imechuyav hashta barishain loy. B'sheni mibai. But I have to come to teach you a chiyav. We know already in Pesach Rishon they're not really chayav onto their own, says Rav Shimon. The only chayav part of a larger group. Elalav mitfela. Umay ish to come Rav Shimon. Inami vichlam ish sel lebeis avos v'goymer. Hahu says Rav Shimon mi bay lelech Rav Yitzchak. So Rav Shimon has this extra pasuk. What does he do with it? He needs it for Rav Yitzchak. Damar ish zoicha ve'ein katan. Zoicha comes to exclude a katan. Ve'ela we'll say over the opinions in one moment. Let's just finish the flow of the Gemara. Ve'ela me ish lefi achloi. What does he do with that pasuk? Says the Gemara. Hamid Rav Yosi savala k'Rav Shimon. Rav Shimon savala k'Rav Yosi. That teaches me that you could check the Karban Pesach even for a Yachid. Meaning, that's a question. Ask the Gemara, you Rav Shimon, what do you do with Rav Yosi's pasuk? Rav Yosi, who was Shita number 2, Rav Yosi, who said every woman could always be by themselves. Ask the Gemara and Rav Shimon, what do you do with that pasuk? Seemingly the pasuk of Meish Lafi Achlai should come to teach me that a woman can yes do the Karban Pesach by themselves. Amar Lacha, Rav Shimon answers, my ish shmas mina tarti comes to teach me 2 different dinim, and that's the end of this. A bit of a lengthy drushes back and forth. Let's at least, again, the psukim you just have to read through again, but let's at least get the 3 shitas very, very clear. We have Rav Yosi on one end of the spectrum, we have Rav Shimon on the other end of the spectrum, and we have Rav Yehuda smack in the middle. Rav Yosi said, again, that's in order of Chumrah, Kula, and middle. The Gemara said, we have Rav Yehuda, Rav Yosi, and Rav Shimon. So let's just say in the order of the Gemara. The Gemara says Rav Yehuda holds Pesach Rishon, a woman could do by themselves. Pesach Sheni, part of a larger group. Rav Yosi, now he again, so that's Rav Yehuda sheet in the middle. Rav Yosi sheet all the way on the right says women could do Pesach Rishon by themselves. Pesach Sheni by themselves. Rav Shimon, all the way on the left, says women cannot do Pesach Sheni at all. Pesach Rishon they could do, part of a larger group. So I say that Rav Yosi and Rav Shimon are 2 extremes, because Rav Yosi says women could always do it. Rav Shimon says almost women can never do it, only Pesach Rishon, part of a larger group. And in the middle we have Rav Yehuda, Shita number 1, that said Pesach Rishon, women can do by themselves. Pesach Sheni, they can be part of a larger group. And again, the Gemara tied up all loose ends. How do we learn that from the Psukim? And the basic limudim that we have is we have a par of nefesh that comes to include. We have every time the Torah says ish coming to include, and the important thing is always realize anytime we have an inclusion, we always then have to ask, wait, so if the women are included, they should be able to do it by themselves, and then we have a limitation telling us no, they can only be part of a larger group. Let's finish up the Gemara. Come on, Azla Hada Amar Rav Elazar. According to whom does this din of Rav Elazar apply? Isha Berisha in Chayva B'Sheni Rishos. Rav Elazar said, Karban Pesach Rishon women have an obligation. B'Sheni it's a Rishos. They're allowed to. V'Doiches a Shabbos, and it pushes off Shabbos. So before we figure out whose opinion this is, says Gemara, 1 second. I Rishos am I Doiches a Shabbos? If it's only a Rishos, you're allowed to do it. So why is it Doiches Shabbos? Ela Ema B'Sheni Rishos. The second carbon, they're allowed. So who is this going like? So we know for sure it's not Rav Shimon, because Rav Shimon didn't allow anything on the carbon Pesach Sheni. So who is it like? Says the Gemara, Rav Yosi, Rav Yehuda. Come on, Rav Yehuda. It's like the opinion of Rav Yehuda, who differentiated between Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni. Who else? Pesach Rishon they could do by themselves, similar to Chayva. Pesach Sheni they could be along together with everyone else, like we see is a Rishos. And another din that we're seeing now about Pesach Rishon is that will yes be Deiches Shabbos. Amar Rav Yaakov, Amar Rav Yochanan, Ein Oisel Chabura Shekulam Kairim. We can't make a group of only Kairim. A sidebar din. Why Shemi Daktu Bay Vivel? So we're afraid they're going to be too meticulous, too nervous, and they might come to make the animal puzzle. We're actually going to stop over here. I know it's a bit short, but this really starts a new sugya over here of Pesach and Matzah and Mar. So we'll pick up from here on Sunday.